welcome back to Ambleford. We're just finishing up our session on home educated children, so you might just hear them in the background clearing off site. But we thought this would be a great opportunity to have a chat about the effect of social media on children, their mental health, their ability to focus in schools, and I suppose look at the benefits and the risks, absolutely, of early exposure to social media, particularly at a time when the government is looking to clamp down on access for children to social media. So let's get into it. My name's James and this is
Emily.
We're from Ambleford, and so let's have a think about our first question. So I've got on my clipboard here. So obviously you've got 20 years teaching, I suppose from the advent of social media, pretty much.
Yeah.
And you've been teaching over that period of time. So it's been you must have noticed its effect in the classroom over that period of time. So social media, how does it affect behaviour, do you think?
It's a huge question, and I have to say, I think it's probably one that has only become kind of relevant over the last probably maximum of 10 years. I think, when social media was born, it was something that was predominantly for grown-ups. It was about kind of reconnecting and all this kind of thing.
Back to the Friends You Reunited days, if you can remember those.
If you can remember that.
MySpace, yeah, absolutely.
So that's kind of where it all started. But I think, and at that stage, it just wasn't a space. I mean, children didn't have access to the internet beyond kind of, sort of dial-up and things like that.
Yeah,
it was
that's
still
true.
Very much at a stage where you didn't live with the world in your pocket.
And actually, maybe it was more about the devices. The devices have changed and become more connected to children than they were. Families used to have a desktop, and that was kind of predominantly owned by the family. It was in a very tended to be in a central place of the home, and so children couldn't sneak off and have access to things without that level of supervision. And maybe that's key, isn't it? Though, actually, part of it's unfettered access, unregulated access to social media that is the damage.
I mean, that is possible, but I think going back to the question about behaviour, I think the links now very much that I have seen, and I would say I continue to see, are that the behaviour means that children are creating a persona almost online that they then have to try and bring into the real world. It places a pressure on young people to actually become something that almost can only occur in a digital world. And
so they're becoming kind of avatars of themselves, almost like distinct from themselves.
Almost. And I think there is a pressure for you to, kind of have that filtered appearance, the filtered voice, the filtered life almost. And actually that's probably the biggest issues in terms of behaviour with social media, is that actually the pressure it places on young people to conform to this kind of perfect existence. Everything is about what somebody else thinks. So your behaviour is therefore always controlled by what you think other people will like or not like. Or
when we talk about behaviour, what do we actually mean? And particularly, because obviously we see its impact from a forest school perspective, but from a school perspective, obviously it's slightly different. What do we mean by kind of behavioural issues?
I mean, I think we're not talking about kind of the kind of physical side of things. I think actually it's much more mental health based and kind of self-esteem based, confidence based. Absolutely, it's that kind of inner self-worth and self-belief in whoever it is and whatever it is that you are.
In fact, I was having a conversation about this earlier today about one of the children that we have with us, who has to kind of be the centre of attention, be the joker. And it's almost like when we talk about being an avatar of their true selves, they're a naturally witty and vibrant child, and that's great, that energy. But when they have to feel that's they define themselves by that, and that's where it creates disruptive behaviour.
Absolutely. And I think there's that sense of, because of the rise of the kind of smartphones and all the rest of it, there's this sense of always someone else might see, somebody might be recording this, and that can go, you know, for the better or for the worse. You know, some things that are very, very silly, that I am sure in our generation we did just as much as this generation do, but it was left in the past because, you know, people might remember it, but that's it. There's no evidence. And I think, unfortunately, now, you know, actually, the first thing you do, you know, whether it's, you know, somebody proposing in a park or whether it's a fight in the high street, everything
lived through a digital lens.
The phones are out and somebody's trying to capture it. And I suppose that's where I kind of think in terms of the behaviour. It's not behaviour in the sense of, you know, we need a behaviour plan, or, you know, in a scholastic sense. It's just actually the children's presence, I suppose.
Or the lack thereof.
Or the lack thereof, absolutely.
So do you think that children, because of social media, are under more pressure than they were when we were kids? And it's difficult to say this without, or maybe even answer this question without putting a rose-tinted glass on the past. So we've got to be careful of that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I would say I would not, in any universe, choose to be growing up around the social media stakes that there are in the world that we live in.
I remember when I was at school, you know, there was pressure to have the right trainers, the right, even having the wrong bag, you know, could lead to you getting kind of filled in.
Okay.
That was just maybe my school, but that was definite risk. And so those pressures, that peer pressure did exist.
Yeah. I don't think that's new.
No.
I don't think the desire to fit in, the desire to kind of run along with trends, I don't think any of that is new.
No.
But I think the speed at which these things change has
true.
Grown exponentially.
I mean, I was just thinking about some of there's clearly social media trends that kind of ride a wave within our practice. They'll, like, little sayings or little turns of phrase or little kind of an example is that kind of 6-7 thing, which I've still not got the gist of where that's come from. But that kind of reached a plateau, and then it's started to come back down. But every so often there's just that.
Yeah.
And it does. That kind of becomes a disruptive force at some point. Just those.
But again, I think even those things have always existed. I think there's always been the kind of the playground chant that's come from somewhere, and, you know, someone's cousin's brother's uncle told them about it. I think these things have always existed, and I don't think that's so much the problem. It's when it's kind of visual and auditory, and then there's the potential for children whose parents are kind of saying, no, we're not going down this route, to then feel completely excluded.
I kind of, you know, I'm going to sit on the fence a little bit and kind of come at this from a different angle, because I remember at school, again, you know, I was thinking back about it just then about, you know, that, for instance, there was an advert on TV where this guy painted himself orange and would come up behind you and go, "You've been tangoed." And I remember that being a thing in school. And I remember it being such a thing that it went on the national news and being banned in schools. And because we did used to do that, which was to go, "You've been tangoed." And, you know, we're breaking kids' eardrums and all that kind of stuff. So, again, just kind of playing devil's advocate for a bit. This stuff's always been there, hasn't it?
Yeah, it has always been there, but I think the difference, as I said, the difference is that it's now there forever. And I think this is the thing, is that, and this is probably one of the biggest dangers, I think, that children can't get their heads around, because they simply, in my opinion, don't have the maturity to do so, is that this stuff will be there forever.
Well, I think where I see the damage being done is where children quite clearly have access to things that isn't age appropriate for them.
Yeah.
So it is that kind of unfettered access to social media, unregulated, lack of kind of parental stewardship over what their children have access to. And a lot of because we've fallen personally into this trap as well, in that none of the parental controls actually work. You know,
no, well, they work until it's on a certain app where actually you can kind of tell that in the background there's been a little bit of, oh well, you know, we'll make sure that screen time doesn't really apply to this particular streaming app, for instance.
I mean, I think that's a warning to parents, though, isn't it? That actually, if you think the device that your child has is safe, it is not.
No.
If you think that the parental controls that exist in that phone are enough to keep your child safe, they are not. Because we've been through this, haven't we? We've tried every parental control there is out there. We've paid for resources. And ultimately, the only parental control that you have is to remove that device, or to oversee in a very careful manner that device. Because I'm going to be slightly controversial about this and say that, you know, actually having free access to things like YouTube and Roblox and these things that you think are safe, in the YouTube's Kids and so on, it is damaging these children.
Yeah, but I think that's a bigger picture in terms of the level of time that is spent kind of accessing these things. And I think, you know, this isn't just social media, this is screens and technology in its entirety. And I find it fascinating that there are countries, Scandinavian countries, who are now saying we will not use anything digital. We are going back to textbooks, we're going back to writing. There isn't even going to be whiteboards that are digital in the classroom. We go back to, you know, whiteboard pens and the big shiny surface that you rub out at the end of the day, because actually it enables the children to tune in rather than tune out.
I mean, I think there's I can sympathise with them, and you know, I think that there's a risk of becoming kind of Luddite in that approach, and I think that there's, you know, this stuff isn't going anywhere, and actually, it's like we, you know, within forest school, we give children knives to use, and it's a tool, and in this environment, it is a tool.
Yeah.
But in other environments, it's a danger. Yeah. And I think the same goes, and the same respect should be to giving your child a knife as it should be to giving them access to some form of digital media. The same rules should apply.
Yeah, I mean, as I say, I think the oversight is the crucial kind of bit.
I mean, there's a question here about how much screen time do you think is too much, and I don't know if that is. I think there's certainly a quantity question, but I think there's a quality question, and I think you can't ask one without addressing also the other. Yeah. There's too much screen time that can be had, but there's also the quality of that screen time.
Yeah.
I think if kids are allowed to kind of doom scroll, that's when it becomes a danger, and ultimately they end up coming across things that damage them psychologically, and it does damage them psychologically.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's then when the algorithms almost take over.
Yeah.
I mean, I saw something earlier which I thought was really interesting, that for a child, from the point where they can access screens up until the age of 18, if they had an hour a day, that's more than 2.5 years of their life on a screen. And when you sort of suddenly go, that's an hour a day, and I think by a lot of people's standards, they would kind of go, I mean, they could do that like before they brush their teeth. Never mind, that's it for the entire day. But when you put it into that context and you say 2.5 years, that's frightening. I mean, that really caught me off guard. And I mean, I don't even want to go there with what it was when it was 6 hours plus, which is the average.
Yeah, again, I kind of I feel the need to come down on the fence a little bit. You could look at any of these stats. We probably spend 4 or 5 days in the toilet, things like that. When you look at these stats, they start to become scary. And I think the danger is, as parents, to, like I say, these things have a place. They can be educational, but there's an over-reliance, particularly in schools, and I think it comes back to what you're saying, of kind of whiteboards and media and that media digital delivery of stuff. There's too much. There's an over-reliance on it.
Yeah.
But it's equally possibly as wrong to kind of say, well, we're going to remove all of this out of schools and go back to a kind of a non-digital, an analog version of education.
I don't know, actually, because I think the thing is that I suppose the idea is that balances what goes on at home, because for most children, they have this access at home. So I suppose it is trying to address the fact that if they have it all day at school and then they have it for most of the evening at home, which many children in the UK do, actually there becomes this reliance of, well, I can't do it, I don't have my phone, or I can't do it, I don't have my laptop, because actually they can't think and process beyond a world where there isn't something else to help them figure the answer.
I mean, there's a bigger question here about, and I think this is probably a question for another podcast another day, but actually, who's responsible for their child's well-being, mental and so on? Is it the school or is it the parents? And actually, sometimes there's some confusion as about, well, they're doing that at school, or they should be doing this at school. But actually, this is a parental issue.
Yeah.
That actually it's not the school's responsibility to measure out the digital stimuli that child gets. That's a parental thing. I think the schools should be kind of mixing how they educate children and introducing children to a digital world in a safe and respectful way. Because, like I say, I'm coming back to my original point, which was, I personally don't think it's a great idea to remove all digital media from schools, because it's a useful tool. So why would you handicap yourself because of that? And as you suggest, but if that is in an effort to counterbalance the screen time at home, then there's a problem there.
Yeah, absolutely. But I think coming back to this idea of social media, I think within schools, actually social media can be kind of catastrophically disastrous, because actually when you have children, and I think this is a more of a secondary school problem than a primary school problem, because for most primary school children, they would not be allowed to have a device with them beyond the front door. It's kind of there for safety in accessing, kind of getting to school, getting home again safely. They aren't allowed in the classroom.
And that's increasingly becoming the case in secondary schools as well.
I think it's
Slowly.
on its way. I think there is massive pushback from the children, and actually, interestingly, from a lot of parents.
Well, herein lies part of one of these issues, and we have had in the past kids being, because we have a blanket ban on phones coming on site, and that's for the safety of the children, and also it's not a distraction while on site. But I know, and there are situations where parents have gone, just stick that in your bag, because if you need to get hold of me, then you can always get hold of me. And I'm like, well, where does that come from? It's almost like if parents feel that if they've got this, their child has this device on them, they've always got that connection to them. And in many ways, the child feels that as well. They need to be free from the shackles of this chain to their parents, which is another reason why we don't allow this stuff on site, because it just gives them that level of freedom. And I question very heavily a parent that feels the need to retain that tie to their child when they're in a very safe, nurturing environment.
Absolutely.
Nothing's going to happen to them here. Nothing could possibly, but there remains that slight paranoia that there's some problems. I'm kind of going off topic slightly, but some problems going to befall them.
Yeah.
But I suppose it's.
But this is where we come back to the social media side of things. In that actually, in secondary schools, because phones have cameras, phones have internet access, and even if they're not on the school Wi-Fi, they will be on 4G, 5G.
Yeah.
And so actually this is then this danger where actually when children have access to social media and they have access to social media around the clock, it's not even like there's that kind of break from kind of 9 till 3:30 for these children. They have to stay connected, because if they don't, someone might post something that they're then on the back foot of. And this is where this behaviour comes from, is that they can't risk being the last person to
it's
find
almost an
something
anxiety about and you know there's some studies which I can't recall in their entirety at the moment, but around how that kind of ping ping, there's that anticipation dopamine hit. When that hits, you kind of go, yeah, you know, and that's why when you put your phone down, it immediately pings, because it makes you pick it back up again. It doesn't want you to put it down.
Yeah.
Now, as adults, we should be able to see through that.
Even if we can't see through it, we at least understand
That's
what's going on. But actually, at
children
11, 12, 13, actually, they just want to be seen. They want to be heard. They want to be noticed. They want to be part of everything.
But it becomes an addiction then.
And this is where a lot of these children are kind of coming from. A lot of children who have been heard through the kind of formal process that's going on in terms of whether actually smartphones and kind of social media for the under 16s is an appropriate thing, that actually it is addictive.
So there's a lot of talk about banning social media for under 16s in the UK. What's your view on that?
I personally think it is a very good idea. I know that is not going to be popular, particularly with our eldest, but I think that children need to be given the space to be children for longer than that is happening at the moment. And I know of 5, 6, 7-year-olds who have gotten phones for Christmas that are connected, that are, you know, kind of, they're already on Snapchat and Instagram and building their social presence at 6 years old, and you kind of think, this is not a healthy world for you to be inhabiting, when actually, you know, you lose the innocence, I think, very quickly, because you again are trying to create this persona, and then you have to keep up with your own persona, and there's always that sense of, I have to do more, I have to do bigger, I have to do better. And I think this is then where you get into these kind of horrific kind of challenges that kids take part in, to be able to say not only that they've seen them, but they've taken part in them, they've completed them. And for the kind of awful moment where children actually come to harm through these things, which actually they would never have been exposed to if they had not had access.
I mean, certainly as parents, I think that our number one aim is to keep childhood for as long as possible. Keep them learning in that playful way. Keep them engaged in a, you know, keep that naivety as long as you can. Not only because it's a beautiful thing to retain as a parent, but actually, you know, from a child perspective, it just gives them the opportunity to grow into themselves, to become what they are going to be through that play-based learning. That's exactly what it's about. The phones don't allow that, kind of cuts that quite sharply, and it's interesting how quickly that damage can be achieved, actually.
And I mean, I think I would almost go as far within that kind of question to say that actually, you know, within the kind of magazines that are aimed at really young children, kind of 2, 3, 4-year-old, where they're given a little kind of pink plastic phone or a purple plastic phone that then they're carrying around everywhere. And I just kind of think, I understand the mimicry. You know, I've got my phone because Mummy's got her phone or Daddy's got his phone. But I don't know. I think this isn't about going backwards to the kind of, you know, it should be kind of pots and pans and little irons or whatever. You know, it's not that in the slightest.
So you're talking. So you're talking about the kind of mimicry, imitative play of using kind of phones and things like that.
I think a phone is for communication.
I don't know if I have such a problem with that. Only because I think about, and a lot of parents would disagree with this, but actually, as soon as, and it's generally boys, they come on site, they'll find an L-shaped stick, and then it becomes a gun.
Yeah.
And because that's just what they want to do, and I don't personally have a problem with that. And again, you know, actually, if they, and I have had kids, you know, pick up a slab of wood, and here's my phone. Oh, okay, fine. Who are you calling? And actually, if you're using that as a means of imaginative play, I don't know if I have such a problem with that.
Maybe.
Yeah, I think that's a very different style of play.
Maybe.
You can disagree with me. That's absolutely
that's
fine.
Okay. So, do we have a closing question for today?
Well, so yes, here's a good one. What advice would you give parents navigating social media with their children? I think it's probably best to kind of end on a closing.
Yeah. Okay, so for me, I would say communication is key. I think that with all of these kind of parental apps, with all of the screening, the monitoring, the everything else, actually having open, honest communication with your child at whatever age it is that you have decided that they are ready for social media, understanding that things might go wrong, and that when they do, the first person that they come and talk to is somebody that they trust, you know, and whoever that is, because actually that's when you know that actually what you're doing is you're building a level of understanding and resilience to things that could go wrong in whatever sense it is, whether it's social media or anything else.
But it's the ability to also, in that sense, to have a relationship with your child where you can discuss those things that do go wrong.
Yeah.
Because the worst case scenario is that they see someone, have access to something happens to them in an online space, and they feel alone and not able to resolve that in their minds.
Yeah, and I think, you know, having things like, you know, we're going to trial this, and you know what we're going to do is I'm just going to check in every few days, or you know, when I feel it's necessary. That's kind of the way that we work with our eldest, is, you know, every so often we'll just say, can I just check what you've been kind of looking at? Can I do that? And it is a permission thing. I'm saying, can I enter your world, and will you share that with me? And actually, invariably, if the answer's no, it's probably because there's been something accessed that he knows is probably not in his best interests, which then leads to communication.
All that the communication between them and somebody else has become inappropriate.
Yeah.
And again, you know, let's not. That does need to be. It almost needs to be policed. You know, and it's a parental responsibility.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of where it is that, you know, actually it's retaining the ability for being a parent, I think, at the end of the day.
Yes.
You know, and I think when the sort of social media thing, you know, whatever that is in every household, for me, it is remembering that actually you are the parent, you're not the best friend, you're not the buddy, you are there to protect, oversee, coach, guide that child through whatever it is that they come across.
And often those lines get blurred, actually. And
They,
again,
they sometimes do.
That's
yeah.
not good for a child's psyche. That's another podcast.
So
for
I
another
think, you know, actually that would probably be my my kind of message, is actually keep those lines of communication open and be honest, be upfront, and actually, you know, if the law changes, it's there for a reason. And actually saying, oh well, I've got it because mum says that I can have it, doesn't make it okay. And that actually is a very fair and reasonable argument to have, to kind of not giving in when there is peer pressure, because there'll always be one child whose parent goes, oh well, I'm just going to give it to you because you really want it.
And it's the easier thing to do. You're because you want to be their mate rather than their parent, and it's the easiest thing to do is to give it to them.
So communication.
No, great summary, and also just coming back to something we discussed earlier, that if you think the controls implemented by social media or on your phone are enough to protect your child, they are not. So that's us for today. See you next time, and just in time, here comes the dog.
They've come to say hi.
Well done.
Right, we'll see you soon, guys.
See you soon. Bye.
Bye.